Welcome to another episode of M&A Plus, The Art After the Deal, where we talk about the post-merger and acquisition world to bring you insights from the experts who make transitions and integrations happen. I'm your host, Lisa Scott, and today I'm happy to be joined by a very special guest, Brant Wilson, the president of Customer Value Systems. Brant brings over 30 years of marketing and management experience across many industries, including technology, healthcare, and financial services. Today, we will explore how strategic marketing and customer insights play an important role in the success of mergers and acquisitions. So welcome to the show, Brant.
Thanks, Lisa. Good to be here.
So first, I would like to ask you a little bit about your career journey and how you got involved in the field of marketing.
I started in marketing at Anheuser-Busch in 1980. I was a PhD student at Washington University in sociology, and because I didn't want to be a boring sociology professor, I took an internship at on the Bud Light marketing team, and they offered me a full-time job, but my wife got an offer down here in Houston, and I was about to finish the degree, so we moved to Houston in 1982, and I left Anheuser-Busch somewhat reluctantly and joined McCann Erickson Advertising, and I had the good fortune of working with a senior executive, Jim Heatherly, who taught me a lot there. But also I worked on Texas Instruments and Exxon accounts. So I learned a little bit about the oil industry and a lot about technology. So that kind of got me started in that area. And the people at Texas Instruments who started Compact Computer approached me about taking a position over there as a head of market research. And so I did that in 1983 and stayed there for about 10 years. We grew the department to about 14, actually about 25 people worldwide. And I was kind of off and running. And at the same time, I enjoyed market research. I enjoyed marketing. I learned a lot about people. I always liked social psychology, how people think, how they make consumer decisions. Mm-hmm. But in the business-to-business world, of course, we sold computers to dealers. And so I had to learn a lot about that part, including, the legal aspects of, financials and margins and all the ways that we had to do to convince customers to select our product over IBM. And then later, after I left, some years later, of course, they had a big merger and acquisition with Hewlett-Packard. And, of course, we did a lot of work that was centered around, and as an independent researcher, I was helping them actually to research things like, what was their new server line going to be worth and things like that. So that's kind of how I got involved in marketing. And at some point, and it was 1994, I decided to start my own business. So this April was 30 years since I've been running the Customer Value System.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So, for our audience's benefit, I would like to kind of go into what is market research? I know a lot of people, when they think about marketing, you think about the creative side of marketing.
Yep.
There's also a highly strategic and tactical side to it, I think, that is involved in it. So maybe give us an overview of what exactly is market research.
Of course, you can get different viewpoints about this, but the main thing is we have expertise at asking the right questions to the right people at the right time. And, any journalist or anyone on the street or any salesperson can ask questions and get answers. But a lot of times the salesperson's question is, don't you want to buy this if we offer it at this deal? Our job is to make sure we're asking questions that are reasonable. We're not pushing or selling a product. We just find out, things like how much they'd be willing to pay. Then we model the data and we give people some estimates or insights on what they can fairly charge for it and get a reasonable demand in their audience. Then we use that to forecast things like what their sales might be, what regions they can succeed in, things like that. What partners or channels they need to sell the product. So that's kind of a typical role of market research. It's used in many other areas like, again, consumer studies. I've most of my career focused on business to business. So I've worked a lot with organizations like software companies, like the energy firms. So we're talking about things like what do petroleum engineers need, or, what do drilling companies do, things like that. That might be an audience for an oil company as opposed to something about, hand lotion or Coca-Cola or things like that, so haven't focused too much on the consumer, but it's the same principles. We just do it in the business environment.
What do you do and what kind of industries do you serve and what kind of customers, what's a good customer profile, a typical customer profile?
Sure. Well, when I started the business, I had a particular direction I was going. I was very enamored by one of the Tom Peters books and some of the others that were on customer retention, looking at loyalty, marketing, and things like that. And so I was going to be a database marketer or an analytics firm. Right away, I figured out, oh, I got to have a bunch of servers and $250,000 worth of software and a whole bunch of capital. I probably have to have offices and all that. I don't really want that. So I had, in the business world, I worked for wonderful companies that even though they were large, they treated people well, and I felt real fortunate, but I liked the independence of kind of doing my own thing. And so I had a good affiliations in the industry. I knew a lot about retention marketing and had studied a lot of the Bain work on the cost of acquiring a new customer versus retaining a current one. And we tried to advise organizations along those lines of how to do a better job of that. However, the career turned a bit because I got requests a lot for doing focus groups. I was a good moderator and could ask the right questions and all that. And that ended up being a lot more dominant part of my business than I had originally expected. And so, over time, my work evolved that way. And a lot of it was global work. Again, we work mostly in the technology field. We do a lot of work in other business fields, though, like other manufacturers, industrial sites, transportation, retail. If it has to do with what I say the supply chain kind of crosses paths with technology, like if you look at a good example, Siemens has a factory in Alpharetta, Georgia, the sensors in the factory that help them measure and load the pallets. We did studies for things like that. Sony and their laptops, how do they sell more of them, and how do they have a business model that allows their people to figure out who the customers are and stay in touch with usability? Or Adobe systems, when they start bundling their products together, like it's not just Acrobat or Photoshop, it's the suite of products. And how do they tell which customers are going to want to go with one line versus another? And then you have things like, retail outlets, like the Toshiba group in North Carolina that does, e-commerce systems, but also point of sale and software, hardware, tools, and a lot of the programs that they use to manage their inventory. So, those are just a smattering of things. Over the years, we've also done a lot of work on employee retention and employee relationships, like for organizations like BP and Chevron and Shell. We've been fortunate to be in Houston, where the oil industry is here, and a lot of massively large companies, but they also have lots of employees. And we've helped them measure things like, how satisfied are customers with the IT systems they have, their own personal desktop computer at work. What about the email system? What about the internet and, all of that? What about the people that answer my support calls? So we've helped them do focus groups in those areas. Now, these are just some examples of the kinds of things that we enjoy doing and that, have served us well over the years.
So could you maybe explain a little bit what a good approach is to customer retention, and also in the context of an acquisition, and kind of what different moving parts do you see or new considerations to make because of an acquisition?
Well, of course. And, Southwest Airlines has had a lot of trouble in the last couple of years. Over the years, they've had a lot of success in, proudly saying they, take their customers or their employees' side if there's a dispute with a customer, even though it's not always the case that the customer is always right. Sometimes they don't treat employees well. Well, in the airline business, that might have gone overboard a little bit, but anyway, that's an example of it. But you have anytime there's a merger or acquisition coming, the rumor mill is rampant. People are worried about getting laid off. They're worried about things like, is my job going to be the same? Who will I be working for? Will they transfer me if I do stay? Is it going to be a job that I like? And so there's always struggles with that. We did some work for one of the large energy companies that did both offshore and onshore drilling, and we helped them by measuring things like how well is the management doing in communicating and letting you know what the latest is, so you don't get taken by surprise on whatever changes there are. Or if an acquisition, there's certainly the hush period where people can't necessarily get the inside scoop, and the company doesn't want eager journalists to go out and publish information that's private. And so it becomes a struggle of keeping employees informed, treating them well as they always should, and, make sure the wages are fair, all of those things. And then, of course, coming up with a deal that's going to protect the rights of the, organization, but also protect the rights of its employees. So, there's a lot of other implications to that, but we've done a number of studies in that area. Mainly it had to do with leadership styles, skills. There's a number of measurement systems that we've used to help organizations train their leaders to make sure that they're following, pretty important questions and principles. Like integral theory is one that's kind of an approach that people use. There's a number of others, and a lot of organizations are very careful in their OD programs to make sure that the organization develops in a way that's not only treating employees fairly, but getting them involved in, the leadership of the company.
Maybe you can explain a little bit like the link between employee, I guess you're talking about the rumor mill, and, employee morale and customer retention. Is there a link to that?
There is. And what they say is, if you go to an Apple store, you'll see that a lot of the people in there that they call the Genius Bar, they're knowledgeable about the iPhones and the everything else that they sell in the store, but they're also representing the company. Most of them have uniforms, really, even though they're informal. They have an attitude that says, hey, I represent Apple, so I better be a smart person, better know what to do. And that's just one example. You can think of many others, but if you don't retain employees, the word gets around that, hey, this is usually not a good place to work, or, there's other things. It's like if you go read a Yelp review about a restaurant, a lot of times if they have all fives, maybe friends and relatives are saying that. And then, of course, in the business industry, you have things like, what is it called, the Glassdoor? I think there's a few other sites like that. I've worked with Gallup over the years, and they have their own things like that with the strength finders. But there's ways of assessing not only management leadership, but employees' profiles. And does management care about the employees enough to make sure not only that they're trained in the things that are going to help their career get ahead, things like financial management, managing their own money. If they're doing that, then they can get by on less of a salary, right? So they're generally happier, even if they're not making as much. But also making sure you reward them with bonuses and commissions and things that will give them an incentive to stay. If they're practicing sound management in those areas and they're communicating well, they generally end up better off. And you hear about the cases when they're not doing that, because they usually go to the media and make a big stink out of it.
Right. So I'm just thinking of a scenario where, a big company buys another big company, and possibly one of the drivers for buying that company is because they're going to get a certain customer or two customers. Yeah. So when those scenarios happen, what are some of the tactical steps, maybe 2 or 3 steps that are really important to, perform in order to ensure that those customers stay with the purchaser?
It's very interesting. We've done a few studies over the years of organizations that were right in the midst of that. Everybody in Silicon Valley, California, kind of knows of the ravenous Oracle Corporation. Well, they bought Hyperion, which was a client of mine back in around 2000, actually from around 1999 to about 2009. And that they made financial management software. And one of the things they did during the transition was the business intelligence tools and software that Hyperion sold. They now became Oracle. And they, of course, they renamed them and all that. But one of the things they did was they had a process by which they incorporated the language, so to speak, of how they communicated with their clients. An example of one of their clients is BMW in Germany, but also in South Carolina and all over the world where they make different cars. And, we were able to help and talk to them about not only how to make their global business more friendly for the customer, but also to make it better for their employees to be able to figure out how to sell it now under the Oracle name. I have the same customers, the same book of business, so to speak, that Oracle kind of bought from Hyperion. But now, not only do we have our platform for BPM and BI and all these other tools, but we now know how to sell them under the Oracle framework because, like SAP, they were known as one of the top financial, ERP systems. And, that gives me a chance to go cross-sell to other customers and all that. So that's just one example of how sometimes this stuff happens over the years when an acquisition is made or when a merger, takes place. They're going to lose a certain number of people because they might have, liked to do it the other way before they were acquired or whatever. But, you can make it succeed if you're good at it. And obviously Larry Ellison has been pretty good at it over the years. They bought so many organizations, like that in different categories.
So say a big name is going to purchase another company, and is it always advantageous? I mean, it shouldn't be taken for granted, right? I mean, so just because I have this big name and I'm just going to be able to, all the customers are going to be happy, we're going to get more customers, plus we're going to keep all the existing because of our name, right? It's not just because of the name. What else do we need to make sure that we do so that we don't lose those customers?
The world I'm most familiar with, and I work with some groups at Shell, at Chevron, at Exxon, at several others, and even, I guess, BP and Shell did some alliances. I even worked with a little bit. And then there was something called Trade Ranger, which was Chevron and Texaco. And so what you find is in these big conglomerate corporations, a lot of times you find people that they're friendly enemies, kind of, so to speak. They compete with each other, but they're all in the business. They understand it, and then there's so many spinoffs in those organizations, like the Aquiva group from Shell and some of the others that, they work in the service station and the convenience store business as opposed to out on the wells or out in the refineries, places like that. So one of the things about those organizations is there's many places a person can land in their career. So from an employee standpoint, there's always opportunity. If you're a petroleum engineer and you're going working on, fracking formations out in Midland or somewhere else, you're probably less likely to look for a job in a refinery or look for a job where one of the gas stations exists at a convenience store. So, but there's plenty of opportunity, but yet it's kind of, managed on a corporate level. I don't know if I answered the question very well there, because I think you were asking more about, how do they handle the employees or how do they retain them? But there might have been more to it. In the customer side, I mean, there again, it's usually about just bringing brand value. I mean, those organizations, again, I can remember using that one example of, some of the convenience stores. First you had 7-Eleven and they got their own gas stations, and now Shell and Exxon, everybody's got them. What's a great story in that marketplace for the customer value is the amount of sophisticated gasoline research that Costco has done. They came in, they and Sam's and these other organizations, Kroger, and you name it, a lot of these big organizations have their own gas pumps. And, Costco did a great job of taking market share from some of the leaders because even though Kirkland gas was an unknown, they did a lot of scientific research that showed that it had, some of the same additives that, kept the engine running smoothly and all that. That's just one example. You can think of a few others. And Anheuser-Busch over the years has bought, hundreds of small breweries and turned them into regional plays for them. They have, lots of national distributors. They've got brewers all over the place. And, it's kind of a nice integrated kind of a vertical integration where the person can get a new brand of beers in a local market that they might not have before they were able to, to make it there. That's just another example.
You talk about, market research for companies to make those decisions on how they infiltrate, a market like that. What types of data analytics would you look at, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, it's a variety of things. Examples of really broad global analytics is like, we're working on a federal project right now where we're, I can't talk about specifics here, but we're collecting data in a foreign country, large amount of data, and we go project that on a regional basis. So we, go and ask people these survey questions, then we get it, and then we go and write an assessment report of the phenomena we're measuring. In the other cases, we've looked at cases where small businesses, can they use big data to actually catch up with, medium and large corporations and be more competitive? It's like someone that runs a dry cleaners or a nursery or a small retail outlet in an area. Can they benefit from that? One of the big drawbacks is they don't have the analytic talent or the database administration to utilize that as much as big companies do. So they're a little bit at a disadvantage, but they are catching up. And with AI today, and with a lot of the tools where they can look at analytics. The other area is like if you take your advertising agencies and social media companies and all that, they do a good job. LinkedIn, for example, does a great job of promoting brands by allowing them to post videos, kind of like we're taking right here, just where people come on and promote their brand. That's another example. And there's lots of analytics that are specific to where people click on the internet. I mean, essentially, if they follow it to a certain landing page, we had a client that we kind of helped be a watchdog for their agency because, every brand has this fear that an agency is going to come in and charge them a lot of money to advertise, but they don't really see the return on investment. So when we think about customer value, you think about return on investment value. Okay, we're spending, if you look at the Super Bowl, okay, we're spending, $100 million on these advertisement. So what do we get out of it? So there's lots of tools and analytics to let you go in and analyze what is the response, how does that lead to a sale? And the same things for lead generation campaigns. People send an email or they post an ad and see if you can respond to it. So there's a lot of what I would call in today's world digital transformation kind of perspectives. And then you also have the loyalty programs like, again, Kroger was a good example. You can go buy a steak in the store. They have a loyalty app. It's already sent you and bombarded you a lot of coupons. And you're in the store. And okay, it wouldn't be a surprise if they tracked you through the location of your phone device over the aisle 12. And then they send you an ad that says, okay, you bought a steak. How about some steak sauce? How about something else, some charcoal? Do you want to go over here and get it? Right. So in today's world, it's almost spooky how much, if you're in your household or in the car and you're talking and your phone is listening to you, don't be surprised if you get an ad from whatever it is, whatever store you were planning to go to or whatever product you were looking for, right? I might be sitting at my grandson's soccer game, but then I get an ad that shows me, oh, well, Amazon just dropped a package on my back porch, and here's a picture of it because they don't want me to tell them later, oh, somebody stole it, right? So they're tracking themselves. This is something a lawyer would appreciate, right? They don't want to get blamed for something they didn't do. So anyway,
right. So how do I guess maybe it's more like small businesses like me. I mean, I'm just thinking how would somebody like me get access to that data? Or I know I get a lot of offers, for example, on LinkedIn or social media to pay such and such amount. And supposedly my information is going out to the right people based on the tags that I tag it to. But it's very expensive. There's no way that I could afford to do it to the extent. But how would somebody like me find my customers? If they're very much in a niche market, like people that are reading about M&A all the time, people that are involved in integration activities, for example, for, companies or for private equity firms. Just as an example, I know it's a little bit of a niche area for me, but maybe we can use it as an example as to how could someone like me infiltrate that sort of data analysis or, data capture.
It's a good point. Paid search and paid advertising and search engine optimization kind of fees are kind of or outbound things. There's a lot of inbound marketing things you can do by tracking people who click on things and all of that, and trying to see if you can attract people to a site. So there's some of that. For if you do a search on things like M&A, you certainly can find the organizations that are interested in. And then again, just using LinkedIn as an example, but I'm sure you could say the same thing about Facebook or X or whatever. It depends on, Facebook is less for B2B and all that, but if you can identify groups on those devices or on those sites where you can then go and see a set of analytics on who goes to the site and what kind of people are on it, you get a chance to judge for yourself. LinkedIn also has a sales navigator, things like that. So in the old days when we did database marketing, you would go to somebody like Axiom over in kind of right down the street from Walmart headquarters. Surprise, surprise. But anyway, they and many others, and Donnelly Marketing, there's a bunch of them that used to sell databases, and those have kind of morphed into, again, online companies now. But you get access to data if you're able to track it down, and the people that do their own business that way, they will have a database that where they have the experience and customer prospects on their database, and they're constantly able to go out to them and communicate. If they have the right messages, if they have the right tools, and they have someone to make those approaches to the customer base.
Like, I mean, I know it's getting pretty robust now, but where do you see it going in the future?
Well, in my field, in a market research field, one of the things it's trying to do is take over all the questionnaire writers. You just turn it over to ChatGPT or the AI companion from Microsoft or something, and you're ending up, they will write and draft a questionnaire for you, do a lot of the content stuff. They will summarize things. I kind of like the fact that they allow a certain amount of browsing and a certain amount of that, what I might call meddling in your work to try to do some of it for you, because it can save you time. It's, over time with the Elon Musk inventions and all the different real robots and things, there's going to be a lot of routine tasks in our everyday life that are, taken over, or at least we have an opportunity that at a very high expense today. But again, it's like automobiles, in the early days, they're all expensive and then they come down in price. Same thing with computers. Same thing with a lot of inventions. So I think over time it will become more commonplace. I think one of the ways that has both good and bad applications is the extent to which what we just talked about a moment ago, everything you do and say is recorded or seen somewhere. There's so much content out there. A lot of it is available on you, and I've been a federal government contractor since 2009. And when there were data breaches at the NSA headquarters, the government essentially gave its employees and its contractors, all of whose identity was exposed during that breach. They gave us kind of a free service for the last 10, 12 years. It's very similar to the one called LifeLock. So it's weird as it might sound. If a sex offender moves into my neighborhood, I'll get a notice if anyone tried to, steal my credit or, made a notice or tried to get my credit card or anything else or my social security number, it would send me an alert. And so these are kind of AI tools, but they also block you from other AI, areas of harm. One of them that is very scary is when they start using AI to clone the voice signs of someone and then play it back to someone for nefarious purposes. But as far as it relates to marketing and customer retention and those things, there's going to be more and more ways of reminding you. It's my wife and I joke that, if you get a doctor's appointment a month ahead, you'll probably, and just same as a medication, a prescription, you'll probably get bugged with about 10 or 12 text messages trying to confirm that you're going to keep the appointment, that you're going to pick up the medicine, or whatever it is. And it's getting irritating. People are saying, well, now that the tools exist, let's just delegate all of the clerical work to the customer. So, it can have a good help in saving you time, but it can also have some really irritating components as well if you don't watch it. I don't know if that's what you were looking for on the answer about AI, but AI is everywhere and is being used by, bad actors. It's also being used by companies for good. It's been, being used by everyone that's, smart enough to deal with it.
What kind of advice would you give to a company looking to better understand their customer needs during a significant transition?
Well, I would have to say this, that the biggest thing that a customer can do rather than a company can do for its customers is to listen to them. If you're actually communicating with them, if you're dialoguing with your customers, if you're regularly soliciting information, and everybody goes to a restaurant or they go to buy a case of wine or whatever, and you get bumped with a questionnaire on the way back. How do we do? Rate us. Usually it's they want to get a review from you, or get your net promoter score on how likely you are to recommend them to a friend or colleague. And that's okay. I like to fill out those surveys because that's the business that I'm in. I like to find out what people are doing. And I also believe that it communicates to management. If I didn't have a good experience and I tell them, they know. If they don't know, they're going to keep repeating the same mistakes. And so as long as they're able to do that, and the same goes for employees. If your company's being acquired and you're worried about losing your job and your management is stiff and resistant to, they're okay with the change because they're going to get paid for it, right, in some way. But if you're the employee and you're on the outs and you don't know what's going on, it could be a communications issue. I think, again, more on the side of the customer. One of the advice I'd give is just to make sure that you're measuring and listening to the customers. And they used to say in management, well, you can't manage what you can't measure. Well, to some extent, that's true. I mean, if you have indicators, you have metrics, and you pay attention to them. There's a lot of companies that go out and measure customer satisfaction on a regular basis, but they don't always deploy it in their policy decisions or what they do, not only for, employees and how they train them to sell, but they don't adapt to things that customers need. So if you can deploy those things and actually implement them, they'll be more beneficial to the customers and to the employees. And if you have happy customers all the time because you're delivering a good product at a fair price, the service is good, then the customers are going to like their job better. If they've always got somebody complaining about something that goes wrong, at some point, that hurts your employee retention and it hurts your customer retention.
Yeah, I heard you say basically happy employees equals happy customers and communication.
Yeah.
Along with that. So it's all about relationships. Communication is really kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. Yeah. The term CRM, customer relationship management, became a hot buzzword. And yes, because of the cost of acquisition marketing being so high and the cost of retention marketing being a lot lower, organizations took advantage of that. And they, companies like Salesforce, they have a CRM software platform. And again, it's one of the more expensive ones, but it allows you, and of course, many, many other organizations, small and large, have those. But essentially, it allows you to keep a database on your customers, to keep up with your communications and touches with them, stay in touch with them on a regular basis, but hopefully without being so irritating that they won't leave me alone. So why are they doing this? You can find the right balance of that, and the messaging is there. And then when there is an offer or a deal or a discount on something, you let them know about that, in a timely way. But, you can even collect feedback on that. Which of these messages are welcome and which ones aren't, right? And if you find that out, then you'll send it to the right customers and not the ones that don't want it.
So what about the actual questionnaires? Is it better for them to be really short and targeted, or, try to cover multiple things in one questionnaire? Or what is the approach?
No, it's always better to be short if you can. There's definitely a correlation between the length of a survey, the shorter the survey, the better the response rate. The better the response rate, the more representative it is and the more projectable it is to a universe. A survey is only a sample estimation of a universe. When the U.S. Census Bureau every 10 years goes out and measures the entire population, that's a census. But if they go out, they go out every month and measure 173,000 Americans on the, American Community Survey, that's a survey. And then it matches the demographics of the whole census population. And then they allow analysts to go in and, evaluate what that is. So they'll know it's representative or not. Right. But if you ask a 40-minute questionnaire, you better pay them a lot of money to do it.
So how can our audience connect with you if they were interested in talking to you more?
Well, they can send me an email at b.wilson@sbcglobal.net and a website, www.customervaluesystems.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn every day. I build up of followers of a little over 20,000. And, I communicate with my clients and prospects and friends and just people that I know as colleagues are there just about every day. So I use that vehicle as a way to get a hold of me, and they certainly can if that's the case. If that's someone who's interested, we stay in touch with people, and I do believe in paying it forward. I don't always look for a sale if I get a communication with someone there. I'm just trying to make sure I stay in touch with my colleagues, that I show some value, that I comment on other people's work. I don't post a lot of videos or do a lot of out marketing. I'm kind of in that stage of my career where I'm enjoying what I do, and I enjoy being selective in the work that I do, but I do enjoy it. So that's why I do it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So it's clear that understanding and leveraging customer value is crucial during any corporate transition, and Brant's insights today shed light on just how to do that effectively. We hope you found this discussion enlightening and that it provides you with new perspectives on the role of marketing during the merger and acquisition process. Remember, if you want to connect with Brant or explore more about customer value systems, we've provided links in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to M&A Plus, The Art After the Deal on your favorite podcast platform to listen to all our episodes. Join us next time as we continue to uncover the strategies, challenges, and successes in the world of post mergers and acquisitions. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.